As lovely as the dragnet displays turned out, we gotta leave this place for a while. Don't get me wrong, there's still a bunch I want to do in this area, but that's sadly not for now, because we have more important areas to tackle, since the lack of resources is kinda driving me insane. So there must be a plan we can come up with for a mob farm, so I don't have to spend countless nights slaying creepers anymore, right? An idea for a mob farm. But that could literally be anything. Like something grand, maybe something tall. I mean, it has to be tall for the mob drops, or we need some space in between for a spawning platform. What if we just make it a landmark somewhere? A monument maybe. We could just make it a tower again. Or why not just both? A tower-like monument, sort of. And if we're already at it, if we're building a monument or a landmark, we gotta create some lore for it, right? So why don't we just build a monument or a tower to reach the gods? That kinda sounds like a plan, no? The only issue is that I have no idea where to build it, but definitely not here. Since the build is gonna be quite lore heavy, I'd like it to be the first cornerstone of an ancient empire in this world that survived and eventually won various kinds of wars. So to answer you guys' questions on if there will be an active civilization in this world, yes, there will be, and we're gonna start with them today. But for now, we're gonna go grab our last few rockets, go to sleep real quick, and then finally head out to find the right location for our mob farm. Which luckily didn't take too long, and I basically found a group of larger kind of islands in the southwest from our starter base. And while the terrain is nowhere near perfect, it's just good enough to alter it and make it our own eventually. So sounds like we found our place to start building our city, or the tower at least, in this episode. To do that though, we'll first have to gather all the resources for the terrain, since I wanted to extend some of the terrain towards the sea a bit in this direction. For now, that means going back next to our starter area, since it's time to gather a bunch of grass blocks for the terrain. And yeah, don't mind them. They're not here at all. I still have no idea where to put them. But yeah, farming grass blocks it is for at least the next hour, since we need about 12 strikers, full of them, I think. So about an hour and 20,000 leaf litter laying around later, we have all the grass together finally, which means we can head on to the next resource that we need. At first I went over to the excavator pit over here, where I get all my stone from, and I got all the different stony kind of blocks, and after that it was time to head over to the desert, or the mesa biome, where I got all the terracotta from that we need. And at last, on a nearby island there was a bunch of gravel, which we also desperately need. So I got that, and with that we have all the materials gathered that we need. So heading home, there was only the crafting and sorting left to do, so the next hour basically just looked like that. Luckily there weren't any too complicated resources needed for the terrain, so it wasn't that bad after all. And with the crafting finally done, we have all the materials together for at least the terrain. So it's time to grab all of the shikers real quick and get back to our building spot in the southwest. I'm glad it's not too far, so our last 17 rockets should be enough, I think. Finally, being back over here, I just realized that all of the shikers don't even fit in our inventory. So it really is that much. But that won't keep us from building this terrain, and I already have a rough idea of what I want, more or less. So we won't overdo it with the terrain, and I keep it more or less simple, since I want the main focus to be on the tower. But enough talking for now. It's finally time to build for a bit at least. So you guys enjoy the cinematics. That took a good while, but we do have the terrain in place now. At least without the detailing. And I also already added the transitioning from our custom terrain to the generated terrain underwater, so we don't have to do that anymore. And aside of that, the spawn proving underneath the terrain is also done. And I'm sure you guys were already able to tell, I decided to add another couple of ruins over here. But hey, they do actually have a use for now, since we desperately needed a place to store our shulkers. And they do improve the vibe of the area, which is why I decided to add them. But they're obviously not done yet, since we're gonna do the detailing later on. There won't be much focus on these ruins, since they're just a little side piece to create asymmetry and add to the tower that we're gonna build in a bit, which is gonna be over here, as you hopefully were able to tell already. It's definitely gonna take a while, since it will be quite tall, but that's for later, because for now we have rocks, since adding rocks is definitely the best thing you can do when you run out of ideas. Together with a couple of pathways or roads even, that will be continued later on in the future city. And over here we're gonna detail a little handmade dock for smaller boats later on. It's looking a bit rough for now, but hear me out, it will be quite beautiful later on. Hopefully. Enough with the terrain and yapping though, since we still have a lot to do, as you guys can tell. Since the next thing on the list is gathering the last few materials for the tower that is planned, for which we kind of have to build another farm. A frogite farm to be exact. It's all about the details, guys, remember. And not just for the tower, but the terrain as well. It looks quite bland for now, but that will change. Once we do the detailing, of course. Aside of the missing detailing, I think it turned out quite good though. And the ruins will definitely add a lot more to it in the end. But it's time for a tower now, so we're gonna leave this place as it is for now and head over to our starter base again, since we need a couple of things from there. There should be a few buckets of tadpoles which we need to get frogs, and on the other hand a couple of building materials to build the actual farm, which wasn't too complicated, was it? And with that, the only thing left is a bucket of powdered snow, which we can easily get from a nearby mountain, hopefully. So it's time to go out and find one really quick. Let's just hope there is some powdered snow over there. Is there? Yep, there is. Bucket of snow. There we go. Now we just gotta get out of here, please. I don't really want to be buried alive. Please, please let me out. Thank you. Bro, I love powdered snow so much. It's insane. Anyway, time to get out of here and go to the nether. For the farm, we do need a bastion remnant, of which I luckily do know the location already. It's basically right around the corner. Now it's just time to figure out how not to die, but luckily we can't really get buried alive here, can we? So it shouldn't be too difficult to stay alive, right? At least that's what I thought, until I found myself over here in this situation. But there's no time to die, at least for now. So we're gonna kill the piglins over here real quick and steal their stuff for now. And with that, we hopefully won't be bothered anymore by those fellas, so it's finally time to put a farm into their beloved home. I love playing Intruder. So much fun taking over someone else's home, right? Anyway, the farm is quite simple, so it didn't take too long and I wasn't bothered much. And that was basically all the building for this farm. Not a lot is said. And the magma slimes are happily jumping around, but not for long, since they're still our biggest issue ahead, which is getting the frogs into the farm. So we do have to put a little nether portal over here, aside to the farm, and wait, it won't take too long getting all 3 different frog types. But yeah, on the other side of the portal, it was basically just waiting 20 minutes for the tadpoles to grow up to get the first frog into the boat, and then finally into the farm. But I think we're being a bit interrupted now by a dying villager that drowned. Yeah, I don't know what that was. I guess they were on vacation or something. Anyway, with the first one in, it was time to get the next 2 from the different biomes, so it was basically just waiting again and playing boat transporter, I guess. And after a good while of waiting and transporting both missing frogs, the very last thing we have to do is get the frogs into the little cage or drop thing over here. And then the farm should work for all 3 different types of froglights, I think. Back at our starter base and about 3 stacks of the yellow froglights and a bunch of shulkers full of materials that I crafted for the tower, there's genuinely not much left to do. There's just a couple of materials missing that we need in bulk, like cobblestone, tuff and deepslate, which we can easily get from our excavator pit over here. So it's basically just one more farm run, and then we should have everything that we need to build the tower, for now at least. But don't worry, I won't bother you guys with material gathering anymore, so back at the base, We're having about 38 shulkers full of materials that we need for the tower, basically. I'm really glad to tell you, especially after farming for hours, that we finally have all the materials together. So we're finally free from farming and we can start building the tower right after transferring the shulkers. So let's just grab them and head over to our little spot again. I kid you not. The feeling of finally being able to build the tower in survival after farming all the materials is so damn good. It's such a relief. So no more yapping, just building for now, and I hear you guys later. And that pretty much looks like a tower now, doesn't it? We got the basic stuff done, for now at least. The schematic is in place and we finally have a little mob farm that works. There's still quite some detailing missing though, and not just on the tower but also the ruins over here, since there's no detailing at all yet. Which will change quite soon though, so don't worry guys. But for now, there's quite some stuff to see, since we have multiple parts to the tower. Starting off of the bottom, you can see the section of the tower into multiple layers, with the bottom layers being wider than the top ones to give it more stability. I decided to display a couple of dry casts around the tower, since they're kind of portraying life and death in a way, on which this monument and the connected religion kind of is based on. In the middle, I created some sort of great hall, which I decided to make very open for a better atmospheric feeling. In here you can find a couple of memorials with candles and paintings, as well as lecterns, and which I might have to put some fucking quills probably. But yeah, they're mainly for people to pray for their loved ones and carry out their beliefs basically. The bottom half of the tower is based on I don't know how many columns, to be honest, so feel free to count, guys. They're really good to display a solid foundation and stability again. And they add negative shapes or space, which is quite essential for the visuals. Above the third layer of the tower, you can see the mob drop over here, with quite a bunch of resources already. So rockets will finally not be a problem anymore, well, hopefully at least. The top of the tower is still quite boring though at the moment, but that will hopefully change with the detailing, since I do have quite some in mind for the entire tower, which will change it a lot actually. And we also can't forget about the surrounding land over here, it definitely needs a bit of grass. In terms of the detailing though, aside of placing some grass here and there, I took quite some inspiration from Assassin's Creed, since you're able to climb and parkour across buildings in those games. I wanted to make not just the tower climbable, but also the entire future city. That will definitely be a challenge though, especially for buildings of this size. So in order to make that possible for a tower over here, I tried to design some kind of scaffolding for a part of it at least, hoping it will not only make us able to climb the tower, but also add to the aesthetic of the area. It will be mainly on the side with the ruins, so we might even be able to connect them with the tower through the scaffoldings and the detailing around here. Before we do that though, there's one last thing that I wanted to do before all of the detailing, which is adding another farm above the mob farm. In this case, it would be a basic sugarcane farm. I mean, if we're already AFKing over here to get the gunpowder, why not for the paper as well? A basic sugarcane farm it is. I like the ones with pistons and observers. I'm sure all of you guys have seen those, so there's no need to further explain. And with just a couple of minutes building over here, we have our first sugarcane farm. Now we just gotta get 2 more and we should be set for a while. Sadly, there was no space for the third one to be complete, so I had to cut off a bit, but with the last one and the collection system over here added, it's all good and running. It's not the best, but it does job, which means we can head over and focus on the important parts now. If I didn't just have to capture a couple of pillagers in boats. But hey, there might be great detailing later on. Heading over to the bow milling to get that out of the way first, which shouldn't take too long hopefully. If there weren't even more pillagers spawning over here. Great. But hey, they might even become future citizens one day. Who knows? With the grass added, it's a bit better now finally, and doesn't feel as dry. I also added a couple of fences around the pathways to kind of enhance them and lead the way. That's generally just spawning more and more pillagers. It's so insane. I'm starting to feel like they're having some sort of complex. But anyway, it's finally time to do the actual detail now. Starting off with the smaller ruins over here, I wanted to add some storage as well as scaffoldings to make it feel more alive. So I'd actually say we just jump straight into it and get some stuff done. As you can see, there's really not too much going on. I just added the little storage part on the floor over here, in which we can store our empty shulkers and our leftover materials from the building, and the scaffold in which you can actually climb on to the very top, with just a bit of help from the wind chargers, incorporated into a pulley, basically, which is based on another Assassin's Creed mechanic, where you cut through a rope and get lifted by a counterweight, usually a sandsack. So basically a different kind of pulley. But since there's no rope, you can cut the Minecraft wind chargers have to do it for now. And we might have to use them again for even larger distances on the tower, which we still have to climb. Aside of that, we have a little hanging bridge connecting the 2 buildings, which basically makes the entire area of the little ruins complete. Which means we can head over to the larger scaffolding part on this side of the tower. It's definitely gonna be a bit larger than the first scaffolding over here, since there's a lot more height that we have to travel in order to get to the top. So starting off, we definitely need a larger foundation or a wider one. And since it's a construction site, we have some resources gathered around the area, together with some storage space and shelter as well. Since I want multiple ways to get on top of the platforms, I decided to add a staircase besides the ladders that will be added. Overall, I'm heavily working with fences, trapdoors and shelves, since those pretty much give you enough options to create jump ups and ladders when wanted, with enough variety of course. And that doesn't really look too bad so far. I'm trying to go for a kind of messy look for the scaffolding, and I want a bunch of stuff going on, so we're having multiple platforms on different elevations and different jump ups, kind of, from platform to platform, as well as different kinds of ladders spread across the entire scaffolding. And since signs definitely help a lot with the visuals, I'm spreading them across the entire build a little. The higher we get, the thinner the scaffolding turns out to be. And at some point I went over to adding a bit of foliage to the tower instead, and started carving into the walls a bit to make the tower climbable. And after adding another wind charge pulley, there was nothing left to do for the scaffolding. So I went over and detailed the room at the top of the tower, which I kept quite simple since it was only supposed to be used to create gunpowder and for more little rituals, until I realized that we don't have any entrance or exit for the sugarcane farm. So we had to do that. And I went over to create a little floor entrance and exit powered by wind charges basically. Luckily it wasn't too complicated, and even I was able to figure out how to build this little door, and it works pretty much fine. When you're at the bottom, you just use the button and the pistons and the wind charges do their job. And at the top you have a button right next to the door, or another hidden button in this brewing stand over here. Either of them work, and you should have enough time for both of them to be honest, but the one right next to the door is just a bit more convenient. And that's pretty much it for now. Might do the interior of the sugarcane farm eventually and create a little room for it and whatsoever, but it's not really needed at the moment. So we're going over to the next Assassin's Creed mechanic, which is called Leap of Fate, where you usually jump into some sort of hay bale or water from a high place like this one. So if you have feather falling forward boots, you will survive this jump over here with around 3 hearts, as long as you hit the hay bale or water. Otherwise you probably just die. And after adding another hay carriage over here, we can finally have fun breaking our legs on this side as well. On the other hand, the last few things, we're adding a couple of lampposts next to the pathways and spawn through most of the area, as well as adding a bit more foliage. Basically just a couple of bushes here and there and some firefly bushes next to the sea. And together with our new little villagers roaming around over here, that's all for today's video actually. I feel like it turned out quite good, and it's a great addition to the world. And aside of finally having a mob farm, I probably like the fact that we can climb the tower the most. Like, having a build you can actually interact with is the best in my opinion. But you guys let me know in the comments what you like the most. And please tell me the villagers don't just spoil my world this often, since it can't be real. But that's it for today's video. I really hope you guys enjoyed it, and feel free to check out my new Patreon if you're interested in a world download. Link is in the video description, and with that being said, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.